Hey everyone, it's Mr. Drake. Today's video will go over the basics, planning steps, and the rubric for the document-based question on the AP U.S. History exam as of the revised revisions of 2016. So here's what we're going to cover in this video today. We'll start off by talking about the basics of the DBQ, how long it is, what it counts for on the exam, etc. We'll talk about what the rubric asks you to do on the new DBQ, and we'll go through each point on the rubric and talk about how you can earn that point. And then we'll talk about how to plan out and organize a DBQ. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. So first, a quick overview of the DBQ. It is one of the essays in Part 2 of the AP U.S. History exam, the free response section. It counts 25% of your total exam score. You have 55 minutes to do the DBQ. That's the suggested time. And they suggest 15 minutes to plan and about 40 minutes to write. Used to be you had to do planning in the first 15 minutes. They've now changed that up and changed the 15 minutes to a recommended planning period. So if you feel like you're done with your planning in 10 minutes, you can go ahead and start writing and have a little extra time, but take as much time as you need to plan. The DBQ is a question about a historical event or trend or period, and they give you 6 or 7 documents that relate in some way to that question. It could be quotes, it could be photographs, cartoons. They don't do a lot of charts and data anymore because you have to analyze point of view and things like that and bias, and it's really hard to analyze bias in a chart. But anyway, you must use those documents to sort of construct your response and defend whatever you're trying to argue in the DBQ. And we'll talk a little more about that as we go over the rubric. So here's what the rubric of the DBQ looks like. The DBQ is scored on a 7-point rubric. 2 of those 7 points are the thesis. You can get up to 2. The first point is answering the question, actually addressing what they're asking you, and making a historically defensible claim. So you have to take a stand and actually make a clear argument in your thesis. So if the question was asking you, to what extent did an event cause this war to start, you actually have to say that it was a major factor in that war starting, or the event was not a major factor in this war starting, or while it was a factor, something else was a bigger factor, something that you're going to be able to then back up later in the paper and actually take a stand. They're also emphasizing starting this year the thesis must be located in one place. It needs to be in the introduction. It can be in the conclusion, but I'm not going to be happy if you put it towards the end. You need to knock the thesis out at the beginning. You get a second point on the thesis for supporting and developing a cohesive argument that shows complexity. So if you can point out some contradictions, some trends, how this event ties into the larger arc or scope of history, if your thesis is complex and really well written, and then you back it up very well, that's going to get you that second point. The next 2 points come from document analysis, the use of the documents they give you to help defend your thesis and construct your response. You have to use at least 6 of the documents in some way to support your thesis or your argument. If you can use 6 documents somewhere in the essay and use them to back something up, you will get 1 point. To get the second point, you have to explain the significance of a document's point of view, purpose, audience, or context in at least 4 of those documents. You have to use 6 to get the first point, and then if you do what they call extended analysis on at least 4 of those documents, you can get the second point as well. So point of view is talking about how, the fact that maybe the author of the document is a woman, how African American or Native American, like how that impacts their view on something. Purpose, what was it for? Was it trying to recruit somebody? Was it trying to convince people to support a war or oppose a war, anything like that? Audience, who are they speaking to? Rich people? Are they speaking to poor people? Are they speaking to Republicans? Are they speaking to women? And talking about, how that colors what the document is saying or what it means. And then historical context, what else is going on at the time that may impact what that person is saying. So this is how you get the points for actually using the documents. In addition to the information from the documents, you get 2 points for use of evidence. 1 point of that is called contextualization. This is where you explain sort of what else is going on at the time period that this question is asking about, sort of setting the scene, as they say in a lot of English classes. I always call it the what's going on point. You need to kind of talk about, what has happened in the years prior to the period they're asking you about in the question, for instance, or kind of what else is going on at the same time that's affecting that event. I want you to put this at the beginning. You don't have to put contextualization at the beginning, but I think it's easier if you go ahead and knock it out and set the scene right up front before you go into your thesis. And we'll work on that a lot in class if you're one of my students. You also get a point for outside information. You need to have a piece of specific evidence that's relevant to the question that's not part of the document. It's not mentioned in the document specifically. It's just something else about that time period they're asking you about. And you need to explain how it ties into the argument. If it's a question about civil rights, for instance, you can't just name drop Rosa Parks and then move on. You actually have to explain her significance to the civil rights movement, if that makes any sense. The College Board is not clear on how much outside information you need. I require at least 1 to 2 pieces per paragraph that you write in your essay. And again, we will practice that incessantly if you're in my classes. The final and maybe toughest point to understand on the DBQ rubric is the 7th point for synthesis. The synthesis point means that you have to extend your argument in some way. So what you need to do is take the topic of your essay, whatever it is they're asking you to write about, and then tie it into something else, like draw a parallel between that event and another event. So that could be in a different historical period, like if you were writing about the French and Indian War, maybe you could tie it into the American Revolution in some way, shape, or form and show how one led to the other. That could be synthesis. Or you could tie it into a focus or a theme that's not what they're asking you about in the essay itself. So if the essay was about social history and you tied it into political events at the time, that could be considered synthesis as well. So again, something we're going to work on a lot. It's an easy point to get if you know how to do it. But having been at the AP reading last year, I can tell you that not a lot of people know how to do it well. I probably gave the synthesis point on 10% of the essays that I scored just because people didn't know how to do it, or they connected things that were not really alike in any way or anything like that. So we'll work on that, and you'll be good at it by the time we're done. So now that we've talked about what you're supposed to do on the DBQ, let's talk a little bit about how you actually knock the essay out when you have one sitting right in front of you. So remember, you get a suggested 15 minutes to plan. So let's talk about what you should do in that 15 minutes. My strategy first is to look at the question itself, because they give you the question at the beginning, then they give you documents after that. I would just look at the question first and think of ways you could answer that question. Like, don't look at the documents yet, okay? Just try to figure out the answer to the question they're asking you without the help of the documents. And then start looking at the documents and see how the documents fit into what you thought the answer might be. And if you have enough documents to support that answer, you're probably in really good shape. If not, you might need to adjust your thesis a little bit, but of course, again, make sure you're coming up with a thesis and stuff that you can actually defend. So as you're looking through the documents, you are allowed to write all over them. You can mark them up, you can try to group them together. That's going to be helpful when you're making your outline, so you know which documents go in which paragraph. As you go through, especially make notes on extended analysis. If you notice if a point of view thing or a purpose kind of pops out at you, make a note of that, so that when you're actually writing the essay, you remember to include those things. You can also, in the margins, write outside information that you think of as you're going through the documents or as you look at the question. Remember, if it's not mentioned specifically in the documents, it could be counted as outside information if you use it properly. So don't overthink it or think a piece of outside information is too obvious or too simplistic. If it's not there and it's relevant to the question, you can use it and it will count as outside information. So once you've done these things as you're planning out your DBQ, you can start making your outline. Here's what your outline should look like. Obviously, you're going to start with the introduction. Again, you want to put your contextualization up front, set the scene, go ahead and knock that point out on the rubric. 2 to 3 sentences is what you need for contextualization. They do not want it to be just one sentence or one little phrase. They want you to be able to explain in some degree of detail, what's going on at that time. After your contextualization, you're going to put your thesis statement. Thesis statement could be one sentence. It's probably going to be 2 to 3, especially if it's a good one that's going to earn both of those points. Okay, if you're writing a DBQ outline for me in class as part of an activity, you're going to have to write all of those things out completely. You may not have time to write out every single word of your thesis if you're planning on the exam and you've only got 15 minutes to plan. But if you're doing a DBQ outline for me, you need to write all of those things out, and they need to all be 2 to 3 sentences. This body paragraph part you can repeat as needed. You'll need at least 2, probably 3. You need to write out a topic sentence to sort of guide you as you think about what you're going to be putting in this paragraph, and then list what documents you're going to use in that paragraph. You will use at least 2 documents in each paragraph. You need to make sure you're trying to group the documents together. That's a way to effectively give some basic analysis, but if you want to do extended analysis, you're going to have to add something, and that's what's in parentheses there. So list each document you're going to use in the paragraph, and then how you're going to analyze it: POV, context, audience, purpose, right? And then list at least one outside information piece for each body paragraph. Okay, again, we don't know how much the College Board is going to require. They're very finicky on that. You must have at least one piece of outside information in each paragraph. Then your conclusion. If you can't work the synthesis in somewhere else in the essay, sometimes you can find a way to put it into a body paragraph and draw up a comparison. But if you can't, you need to work it in here. Okay, most people put the synthesis in the conclusion. It's not required though. And then you just need to kind of restate your argument and your thesis statement and sort of summarize your essay and tie things up in a neat little bow. Okay, so I will have this slide here on Moodle if you're one of my kids, and you'll be able to access this format of an outline to utilize it over the course of the year, either for activities in class or as needed when you're planning out your essay. So that will do it for today. As always, feel free to ask questions either in class or in the comment section below. Cheers.